I am learning these last 3.5 years to um, sort of collect all of the thoughts that have kind of been running around my brain as a physician for the last 35 years and try to make sense of the suffering that I experience when patients come to me for ostensibly medical reasons. The more I practice, I realize that it's always a little bit deeper than that. There's always something a little bit more, under the surface. Um, and the more I practice, I think the better, hopefully, I become at recognizing and, just going beyond the mechanistic part of medicine and more into the healing arts. So I love the merging of my practice, both of my practices, my medical and my Zen practice. I have a daily practice of when I can, if I don't have to get to the office too quickly, of doing some sutra reading after I sit. So I sit and I do a little ceremony, a little ritual, and then I read sutra. And right now, I'm reading an anthology, you might be aware of it, that's put together by Bhikkhu Bodhi. And it's sort of the best hits, if you will, of the Pali, the Pali canon. And I love this because I haven't had the opportunity yet to really to extensively read the Pali Suttas yet. I hope to as I continue my practice. But this is really a wonderful book that connects me to Buddha's words in a way that I don't necessarily feel that I can access from a pure Mahayana perspective. And so this practice of reading this anthology has sort of connected me, with original teachings, but always with kind of a Mahayana mind. And I was reading some suttas about karma, and this really started me thinking about karma and rebirths, and how do I square rebirths, because that's really a major part of karma, at least from the Pali perspective. And so I put some thoughts together, and so I'm going to present that to you now. Venerable Kumaralabdha, the 19th ancestor, journeyed to central India, where he met a seeker called Jayata, who asked him, "My parents follow the path of the three treasures, but they have been sick, and nothing they do goes well. Our next-door neighbors have been engaged in the low practice of slaughtering animals, yet they are healthy and content. How come they are happy while we are so unfortunate?" Kumaralabdha said, "Why should you doubt? The results from our wholesome and unwholesome actions take effect in the three periods. But people only see that the peaceful die young and the violent live long, or that the unrighteous prosper and the righteous decline. They deny the law of cause and effect and say that our sins and good deeds are without consequences. They do not know that the shadows and echoes follow our actions without a hair-breadth gap. The results of our actions don't get worn away even in 100, 1,000, or 10,000 eons." Hearing these words, Jayata was freed from his doubts. This story is from Kaz Tanahashi's translation of Dogen Zenji's Shobogenzo. It is the 85th fascicle called Sanji Go and translates as karma in the three periods. I've always been interested and intrigued by the concept of karma. When I was younger, I remember thinking that when bad things happened to me, it must have been due to something that I did to deserve it. It was bad karma. On occasions when good things happened, I remember thinking, gee, I must have done something good. Amazing, good karma. That might be a simplistic approach to dharmic cause and effect. And at the same time, if it has the intended effect of keeping me mindful of my choices in body, speech, and mind, and treating me to do wholesome rather than unwholesome things, then maybe that's what the Buddha had in mind. Unwholesome, I think, means what is not generally beneficial to others or myself. To take a recent example in the press, someone who invented credentials and exaggerated their qualifications on a job application, they're setting themselves up to the situation not working out so well, either for the employer or for themselves, the employee. The employee may find themselves well in over their head and quite embarrassed, and the people that they intend to serve could get hurt. Wholesome actions tend to be beneficial for those around us, including oneself. We'll see how wholesome actions for others can inure benefit to the self. Now, this gets a little sticky when we see or hear or read about people who we feel aren't doing such a good job or doing such good things. And they seem to be reaping financial rewards or the benefits of power and never seem to get their just deserts, in our opinion. This is Jayata's concern in the story. We may not know, though, the full measure of these people's actions, but we feel pretty confident that they are getting rewarded for their greed, hate, or delusions. But I think Kumaralabdha is cautioning us against too simplistic of a causal relationship. We don't know what lurks in the shadows and echoes of our actions. There are subtle effects that seep deep into the consciousness and subconsciousness of our minds and in those whom we interact with. Actions that influence other actions, and so forth. These ripple out like a stone tossed in the middle of a pond. We don't know the depth of mental suffering, angst, and anguish of the rich and powerful narcissist who seems to be constantly rewarded for being such a lout. We don't know enough about their full situation to be a competent judge because we don't, frankly, know enough about our own situation. And we're us. You know, I have to remind myself of this again and again. It makes sense. But what's harder for me to appreciate is all the talk in the vast Buddhist literature of how our actions have consequences on our future rebirths. I'm a physician. I took a lot of science classes. I like to think that I'm rather sophisticated in my approach to the scientific method. I find it hard to buy this idea of rebirths. I don't really believe in one heaven or one hell, let alone a number of heavens or hells. So how do I try to understand these as allegories for my present life? As a wake-up call to the potential suffering I can cause in the mental well-being of others. As personal psychological states, the hells of guilt and inconsolable remorse. Are they even allegories at all if the psychological effects of our unwholesome acts are very real and long-lasting and difficult to shake off? Or is the majority of our personal makeup and then the resultant behavior simply determined by our genetics? In Bhikkhu Bodhi's anthology of the Buddha's discourses, he includes a number of sutras that discuss the result of one's choices and the resulting effects on rebirth. If you did, on balance, wholesome deeds, then you had a good chance at rebirth into the Deva, godlike world, or in the human world. In this system, a rebirth in the human world is desirable. If you did, on balance, mostly unwholesome things, you were likely to be born in one of the hell realms or in the animal realm. Bhikkhu Bodhi explains that the Buddha's teachings on the Dharma were specifically geared toward the level of sophistication of his audience at the moment that he was speaking. And this might have ranged from lay people with little exposure to the Dharma, or to individuals seeking to join the path, or to longtime practitioners of other paths, or of our path. And so the Buddha was using skillful means throughout his teaching career to efficiently and optimally open his listeners' eyes to the Dharma. Many of the listeners of his day living in South Asia were no doubt quite familiar with the idea of rebirths. What better way for the ruling class to explain to the lower castes to keep working hard, because your next lifetime could be as a ruler instead of the ruled? The Buddha capitalizes on these beliefs to teach his lay followers, monks, and nuns about the serious effect of karma lasting beyond this lifetime. But how do we take karma seriously enough today if some of us don't believe in the literal concept of reincarnation? For me, the answer is in how I can influence others with my wholesome or unwholesome acts and the psychological effects of these actions on my own well-being and suffering. And to increase the likelihood of performing wholesome acts, we have our practice to instill good habits. We can certainly influence others behaviorally. If I'm in a grumpy mood and I'm curt or unkind to my spouse or a coworker, it's likely that they will also come away from that dialogue grumpy or hurt. And this can continue for a time and propagate to others. And the grumpy mood I was in becomes even worse with the guilt and remorse that I inevitably have at making my spouse or coworker suffer because of my own suffering. The hell that I've created for myself is a psychological one, and how bad it is or how long it lasts depends completely on my own actions. I can refuse to face my own suffering and the suffering that I've caused, Or I can turn to face it, repent, and set out to do better next time. To help set good habits in my life, I have incorporated into my practice a morning ritual of confession after Zazen. All my ancient twisted karma from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born through body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow. And then I take the 3 refuges, bowing at my little altar. I know I have the potential to stumble again during the day and break a precept or 2 through body, speech, or mind. But I feel that I'm increasing the chances of awareness a little bit and the opportunity to alter course and correct with each passing day of practice. And so just that practice in and of itself is comforting. People who suffer from alcohol or substance dependency or may have tendencies towards physical or verbal abuse were often themselves the object of this behavior from others. The propagation of abuse in families is well described in the literature. In these examples, there is likely a genetic component in addition to the behavioral. Our genes can predispose us to certain behavioral modes, such as chemical dependency. And I believe the converse is also true. Our choices and our actions may affect our genotype, which can then be passed on to future generations. I'm not a psychologist or a geneticist, and there is an entire field devoted to the relationship of behavior and genetics. But I really feel there is a connection, a karma of genotype and phenotypic expression that's a 2-way street. My actions can cause emotional and physical changes that are recorded at the cellular level in my body. Cortisol is produced under stress. The sympathetic neural pathways are charged up. Mutations can take place. And I feel this can be recorded in my body. We know cancers can arise when these cellular mutations remain unchecked by our immunologic surveillance cells. It's possible to see how our actions can affect future generations, our next lifetimes, if you will, from both a behavioral as well as now a genetic level. Kumaralabdha said, "Why should you doubt? The results from our wholesome and unwholesome actions take effect in the 3 periods." My first thought was that the 3 periods are the past, present, and future. Dogen explains the 3 periods as 1, the result received in this lifetime, 2, the result received in the next lifetime, 3, the result received in the lifetime after the next. I do love how Dogen takes just one line from a koan or story and expounds on it for pages and pages in an entire fascicle. It's amazing. In this first period, he says, we receive the results of our actions in this lifetime. It's pretty obvious. We can easily see how the results of karma affect our own life, psychologically, behaviorally, materially, if our actions have caused us, for example, financial loss, or job loss, as in the example that I mentioned in the press of the exaggerated CV. I interpret the second period, the results received in the next lifetime, as the effects that we have on others. The effects on the well-being of our children, our friends, our spouses, our colleagues. How these effects can ripple out to other lives and generations, as I've described. The third period Dogen talks about is very interesting. The lifetime after next. What does he mean by this? He talks of many lifetimes and thousands of eons. This brings to mind not only a great expanse of time, but also of space. Individual causes adding up or multiplying to form a much greater effect. Think of our climate catastrophe. The individual actions that each one of us take now will have collective, far-ranging effects over the entire planet, and from what it looks now, over a very long time. Plastics that last for over 10,000 years. The extinction of myriad species. These effects have gone way beyond lurking in the shadows and echoes, and are becoming manifest in this lifetime, will be manifest in the next lifetime, and the lifetime after the next. Confronted with the awesomeness of our actions, little actions that can rip outward in time and space ceaselessly, it can be easy to throw up our arms and think that there's no use in worrying about it. There's nothing I can do. It won't have an effect. It's too small. What will happen will happen. Or falling into the trap of Jayata and thinking that the system is rigged, since evildoers appear to be positively rewarded, seemingly reinforcing their despicable behavior. To deny cause and effect completely and stumble on with the delusion that there is no connection, since we don't see one. Either way, Dogen warns us that we're in for trouble when we ignore karma. The effects of our actions that we generate today, from moment to moment, affect this lifetime, the next lifetime, and the lifetime after the next. And as we have received the effects of those that have come before, so do we pass on karma to others. There is an unbroken link of karma from what has come before to what will come next. Every small, wholesome action we can take to be kind, to be generous, to listen, to seek to understand, enhances the likelihood of buoying up the positive effects of many others who dwell in the shadows and echoes. There is no wholesome action that is too small. And it's our practice that helps bring that to fruition. Well, I hope I've made a realistic case for karma. If you're like me and you find it hard to accept literal rebirths, heavens and hells, given the wide acceptance of Western psychology and research findings linking genetics and behavior and consumption and climate, the Buddha's teachings are still extremely relevant today. The path to bending the karma curve, if you will, depends on doing the right thing. Wholesome actions that benefit others, which in turn benefit us. No matter how modest these beneficial actions might seem to be, we can practice dropping away of body and mind, losing the ego self. Wholesome actions develop naturally and easily when we drop the ego self. And how do we do that? We show up. We sit. We listen. And now. Thank you.